Hi everybody, it's Maureen from Paw Prints on our Heart Support Group. I'm here with Attorney John Daniels today, and he's going to talk about pet and the laws. Attorney John, if you want to give everybody a little bit of information about yourself, please.
Certainly. From Wisconsin, born and raised. Went to law school at Marquette University, graduated in 1990. I spent the first 17 years of my law career as a district attorney, and the last 16 as a owner in a private law firm.
All right, we'll get started then. Do pets have rights?
Not really. A lot of people like to use the term pets have rights, but they don't. Only people have rights. What pets typically have are what's known as legal protections or statutory protections. In Wisconsin, all the laws regarding animals are put down in Chapter 951. It talks about these are what the animals' rights are in the statutes, not so much as rights as we have like from the Constitution, but statutory protections within the statutes.
Do the laws protect animals in any way?
Absolutely. Right now I can think of that the Wisconsin law specifically prohibits anyone from hurting an animal, either intentionally or with criminal negligence, not feeding them well enough, not keeping their place sanitized well enough, actually physically hurting an animal, hitting it, or whatever other things you would do to an animal that causes it undue pain.
What about in a divorce? Because a lot of the people fight over the animal, and if there's children
That's a change.
involved.
That has changed quite a bit. Initially, the law considered animals as merely what they call chattel, which is an old term for property. It was even codified by the United States Supreme Court. I think it was like in 1898. At that time, the Supreme Court said an animal is simply chattel, property to be dealt with in a matter of dollars and cents, not emotions. It made sort of sense at that time because the courts, I don't think they wanted to start delving into who loves Fido the most, where's the best place for Fido. It was just a matter of dollars and cents. A lot easier for them to deal with it.
Okay. Because I know with exotic animals and horses, it can get pretty costly with a divorce.
Yeah,
right?
and those even get more complicated sometimes. Because you can have a horse, and as you know, you have a horse that's a famous stud, worth millions, not tens of millions. But at the same token, if you have a horse that's really worth a lot, but one of the kids of the marriage really loves it emotionally, now how do you deal with the value? It overlaps. Right. Considering nowadays the courts are more and more taking into account the emotions involved. There are several states actually, California's one, Texas, Rhode Island, I think Alaska, that actually look at the emotional component that someone has with the dog in determining that it has value more than simply, chattel. It has value as far as an emotional connection.
Right. What about when somebody passes and then that person has the animal and the other party wants the animal back?
Oh, absolutely. You always hope you can do that when everyone's still in good moods, and not necessarily after a divorce. So it's really popular in the last 15 years or so. We call them puppy prenups. It doesn't have to deal with puppies. It's just the name we give it. It's where a couple sets up a determination before a divorce saying, in the event of a divorce, you'll get the schnauzer, and he'll keep the bulldog, or whatever the circumstances may be. Because once it's in writing, it's just a contract like any other contract, and the court will enforce it. If it's not dealt with at all, the court is just left to trying to figure it all out.
Okay.
But in another, when you're talking about a death of a property owner, that's called probate, basically, is who gets the value of the dog. Well, if you say nothing, it is simply just the value of a Bernedoodle. That's what it is. If in fact, and this is very common, where they now say, whoever wants my dog can have it, but you have to keep it till the end of its natural lifespan, and then you can get $20,000 from the estate to keep the animal. Okay. There's even circumstances, a very famous one a few years ago with a lady named Lahona Helmsley, who left millions to her dog. So the dog actually owned the houses and owned the cars, and people would come and be the dog's staff, while the dog lived a very plush, lazy life.
Right. And then what happens when the dog passes? Where does that money go then?
Whatever the balance is, usually is considered the reward for the person who is taking care of it.
Oh, I see.
But the issue there is a natural life. The person can't just neglect it or let it get hurt, or God forbid, even hurt it themselves. Then they lose the money. But if they just take it through and the dog will eventually pass, they
Okay.
get the extra.
Are there any other things that you can talk about to help people with animal laws?
Well, the big one is the animals and the divorce. Because
Right.
at that point in time, two things come into play in my mind. If you're splitting and you have, especially if you have kids, the kids are in a very difficult emotional spot right now. Who are they confiding in, and who are they loving, and who are they relying on the most?
Right.
The dog or the cat. So if you don't deal with something, which you always hope that people can be mature enough to deal with that with the animals, taking like the pets, the courts have been doing that lately. It's not really, the courts have very little authority to do that. The courts often have what is a catch-all, doing what's best in the right of justice and fair play. So they throw it under that. But it's becoming much more and more accepted all along, as in they can determine who will get the pet.
Right. What happens when you're not married, divorced, but living together, and you're fighting over the animal when you break
It gets
up?
a little more dicey too. I've seen the courts often fall back on who bought it. If one person brought it into the relationship, they're probably going to keep it after the relationship. If you already are together and you bought it together, then it becomes a little more complicated as to who is the animal really bonded to, and really what's the animal worth. I mean, if they agree and buy a $15,000 fancy horse and it falls in love with one of the persons, well, the courts are not going to look at it as simply you like it more so you get it, because it has so much value. So it becomes quite complicated. That's why try to take care of it when everyone's still in good moods as to who gets the animals. It's better off for yourself in the long run, because fighting over that when you're already emotionally going through a lot can be pretty devastating. But if you already have something that you know, I know I'm going to keep Fluffy, so it just gives you so much more solace in a tough time.
Can they do it where somebody has the animal half the time, like 1 week on, 1 week off, like they do in divorce with kids sometimes?
Sort of. The judges aren't really supposed to make a division of visitation on the animals. Statute does allow them to do that with people, the children, for sure. However, if the parties can act like adults for a while and actually agree, if they put it down in writing in the judge's order for divorce, the judge will enforce it. So if it's agreed to, they can have visitation back and forth with the animal. But the reality of it is, my experience has been those never go well, because eventually it just lets one person have a little bit too much leverage over the other one. Gee, you're not going to agree to my amendment, I'm not bringing back Fido this month. Or I'm going to keep him for a while, you try to get the court to stop me. So it's one way really you'd rather have adults dealing with it than the emotion that's often tied up in a divorce, which unfortunately often attacks logic, and then people act a little odd.
Right.
Get a good lawyer.
And it's best to have things in writing beforehand too.
Absolutely. Writing more than verbal is enforceable, but it's hard to prove. Writing is easy to prove.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add, or?
There is so much more we could go into dealing with pets and the real world, and the passing of pets and the death of pets. Maybe we'll do another interview.
Sounds good. Thank you.